Serpent's Echo, A Chronicle of Unveiling. Written by Otis Moore. The sky, 1,000 years past, had been a bruised canvas over the Mesopotamian plains, heavy with the promise of dawn. But then, an intrusion, not a shooting star, not a comet, but a tearing, silent rend in the upper atmosphere, a silent scream of tearing fabric, though no sound carried, as a vessel, not of earth, burned a scar against the breaking light. It was an aberration, a wound in the celestial dome that the few wide-eyed humans who witnessed it would carry like a fever dream. Its sole occupant, a being designated Cathar from the Draconian stellar collective, had miscalculated, an infinitesimal deviation in gravitational pull, a fraction of an error that cost a millennium. The crash was not merely catastrophic, it was an act of cosmic desecration, ripping a jagged crater in the ancient dust. Yet, Cathar, a bioengineered construct of unparalleled resilience and intellect, survived. Its form, a towering bipedal reptilian, was a nightmare made flesh. Scales of obsidian that seemed to drink the light, eyes that held the cold, ancient wisdom of a dying star, depths of unfathomable cruelty. It was unlike anything this nascent human civilization, clinging to the first frail sparks of consciousness, had ever witnessed. It was the primal fear made manifest. Its initial assessment of humanity was not curiosity, but a chillingly detached contempt, a species driven by the coarse grind of base emotions, consumed by tribalism, clutching desperately at fragments of meaning beyond their fleeting, brutal existences. A perfect canvas, not for art, but for a long-term project. Cathar, stranded, saw not a prison, but a harvesting ground. Its primary directive before the fall had been reconnaissance for a new resource acquisition strategy. Now it would adapt. This world would not merely be exploited, it would be engineered. Every resource, every spark of life, every frantic pulse of cognitive energy would serve. Chapter 1. The Serpent in the Garden, the first twist of the knife. The Draconian collective, Cathar remembered with a cold, analytical precision, hailed from the frigid, resource-scarce reaches of the Epsilon Draconis system. Their very existence was predicated on absolute efficiency, on the long-term acquisition of raw energy in all its forms. Cathar was not just a pilot, it was a living instrument of this pragmatism, a consciousness honed for analysis, utterly devoid of sentiment, driven by the imperative of collective survival and expansion. Its obsidian scales were not mere armor, but a complex bioluminescent composite, capable of subtle shifts in light and color to influence perception, a tool it would soon master on this pathetic world. To Cathar, all life, all matter, was merely energy waiting to be harnessed. Primitive species were not to be annihilated, but cultivated. Their planet's mineral wealth, their biological output, their very cognitive energy, all could be made to serve. The crash had simply accelerated its timetable, forced a more direct, yet still meticulously clandestine approach. Humanity was not to be conquered, it was to be programmed. Cathar understood the insidious power of projection. It understood fear, raw and primal, and it understood the human mind's innate, desperate tendency to deify the inexplicable, to fill the void of the unknown with gods and demons. Its first act was to manifest in a manner that scraped against the deep, forgotten fears and manufactured awe of the local tribes. Drawing upon the dying embers of its ship's energy core, it created localized weather phenomena, storms that brewed from clear skies, lightning that danced with unnatural precision, winds that whispered impossible words in the very bones of those who heard them. It appeared in shimmering, impossible forms, always just at the edge of comprehension, an undulating shadow, a presence that curdled the blood. The nascent oral traditions of the region, already fertile with tales of great serpents and ancient wise ones, provided the perfect psychological substrate. Cathar became the Great Serpent, the Ancient of Days, the Divine Architect, a being of immense power, demanding not love, but a suffocating reverence and an absolute obedience. It did not preach solace or salvation. It preached order, a chilling, unyielding order, demanding sacrifice, and the absolute, unquestionable necessity of its divine guidance for humanity's very survival. With a cold precision, it subtly introduced concepts that would fester in the human psyche for millennia: original sin, a mythical fall from grace, a debt owed to the divine for their very existence. This was the first, most crucial rewrite of history, scrawled not in ink, but in the raw fear of desperate souls, the spiritual enslavement. Humanity, inherently flawed, was forever indebted, forever seeking atonement from a higher power for its redemption. This narrative, seated in the fertile, parched ground of early religious texts and oral traditions, would be copied, translated, and reinterpreted for millennia. Its true origin, the cold reptilian whisper, would be obscured by layers of human dogma.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting to something pretty wild. It's a chronicle, laid out by our sources, about an ancient cosmic incident.
Right, and how its effects supposedly rippled down through, millennia.
Exactly, all the way to one man's really startling discovery and his own personal fight.
We're tracing this narrative of a non-Earth vessel, apparently crashed over Mesopotamia maybe 1,000 years ago.
And its occupant, Cathar, a being from, the Draconian Stellar Collective?
Yeah, that's what the sources claim. And look, this wasn't just a crash site cleanup situation. It's described as something much darker.
Like a desecration.
Yeah.
Leading to some kind of long-term project for humanity.
Precisely. And then we jump forward, modern day, an investigator, Memphis Moore.
Right, who supposedly uncovers the architect of this ancient manipulation.
And in doing so, finds something profound within himself. It's a story that really makes you question things, control, freedom,
Okay, let's start there. The ancient deception, Cathar's arrival. How dramatic was it? What was the initial impact?
Well, the sources paint a terrifying picture. A towering figure, reptilian, bipedal, obsidian scales, eyes reflecting this. Ancient cruelty.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, and it wasn't just scary, it was like a psychological weapon almost. Cathar's intent, super detached.
Detached? How so?
It apparently saw humans not as, say, rivals to conquer, but more like a harvesting ground, something to be engineered, programmed.
A harvesting ground. Wow, okay. And its origin, Epsilon Draconis. How does that background explain its methods?
That's key, actually. The sources link it back to this cold resource poor system, Epsilon Draconis.
Right.
So their whole civilization supposedly was built on efficiency, energy acquisition above all else. It kind of makes you think, about scarcity driving extreme actions.
A chilling parallel.
Totally. For Cathar, life was energy, just something to be gathered. And get this, its scales were apparently bioluminescent.
Not just for show, I'm guessing.
No, they could supposedly influence perception, subtly bend reality right from the start.
Okay, so a crashed alien, manipulative bioluminescence from a resource-hungry culture. How does it go from that to influencing all of humanity? The weather stuff sounds out there.
It does, but here's how the sources lay it out. Cathar used the last dregs of its ship's energy, created local weather events, strange lights, appeared in these shimmering forms.
Playing on early human awe and fear.
Exactly, tapped right into their budding oral traditions, became the great serpent, demanding reverence, sacrifice, obedience, preaching this cold, unyielding order.
And that's where the original sin concept comes in. How did that work strategically?
It wasn't about morality, not really. It was like psychological groundwork. Preconditioning.
Preconditioning for what?
For control.
Yeah.
By seeding this idea that humans are inherently flawed, always owing something, always needing penance, well, you lay the foundation for systems of debt.
Debt, spiritual or financial?
Both, eventually. Perpetual, unpayable debt. It becomes the bedrock of control. The sources call it a mind virus.
A mind virus. Wow, okay, that's a lot. So let's jump ahead. Kissimmee, Florida, 1,000 years later, Memphis Moore. What did he find?
So Memphis Moore, working the graveyard shift at Burger King, physically okay from time and institutions, but mentally fraying.
And he had this fringe academic interest.
Yeah, became an obsession, looking for a common sound, a shared concept across all human cultures, ancient myths, languages.
But his research method was unorthodox, to say the least.
Yeah.
The sources mention meth use.
Yeah, it's a paradox, right? The sources claim that while it was destroying him physically, it somehow sharpened his cognitive focus.
Sharpened it how?
Allowed him to connect things nobody else saw, ancient texts, Sumerian cuneiform, Mayan glyphs, even modern financial algorithms. He saw the patterns.
Following a trail.
A linguistic trail, yeah. Mythic inconsistencies, even a digital fingerprint tracing it all back to Cathar.
And finding the name Cathar, that must have been a moment. What did that discovery do to him?
It brought this chilling clarity. He suddenly understood the prison, as the sources call it, but it also ramped up his paranoia. He felt like Cathar knew he knew.
But then he turned it inward, applied Cathar's system to himself.
That's the critical turn. He saw the planetary control system reflected in his own life.
How so, specifically?
Well, his meth addiction. He started seeing that as his personal system of debt. The cravings were like Cathar's whispers, the drug itself, a false god.
Sacrificing himself to it, just like humanity, in a way.
Exactly, a mirror image. But this prison, his addiction, was one he could maybe fight directly.
So what happened? How did he fight back?
It was brutal, obviously, withdrawal. But he held on to his intellect, that curiosity that started it all, and his big act of rebellion.
Was it?
According to the sources, he applied for a library job.
A library job?
Yeah, a simple choice. One not dictated by the debt, the addiction, the whispers. It was his seismic shift, using the very knowledge that almost broke him to build something new, fighting the prison planet within.
Wow. So from ancient Mesopotamia, a supposed alien manipulator, to a motel room in Kissimmee. One man's fight.
Yeah, and the really striking thing is how he used that knowledge of external control, this massive planetary scale idea, to understand and tackle his internal battle.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Posing a question for you listening right now. How many systems, maybe subtle, maybe obvious, are we all living under? And what can we learn about our own internal struggles, our own prisons maybe, by trying to map those outside forces?
It's definitely something powerful to consider.